The three rules that are changing for 2023, if you're a tournament player, has to do with, number one, how you deal with equipment malfunctions. You have a malfunction with your paddle, something like that, how you deal with that. Number two has to do with determining whether you're the correct server or the returner. If you play tournaments, you know it's always been a thing. You got to know the exact phraseology. That's changed. And number three has to do with how refs call illegal serves. I'm Tony, your master teaching professional. I am at the PPA tournament at Lake Nona, Orlando. You can hear the music in the background. Everybody's playing out here. A lot of fun. We had the chance to interview Mark, the head of officiating at the USA Pickleball, to talk about 5 rules changes. In this video, we're going to cover 3 rules changes that have to do with tournament play.
Third one, again, this really doesn't affect anybody until we get into tournaments, but we have a rule that says, hey, if you have an equipment malfunction, equipment issues, you have to use your regular timeouts before you can apply or appeal to the referee for an equipment timeout. Well, we're getting rid of that requirement. You can ask for an equipment timeout at any time. You don't have to use your normal timeouts. I think that's reasonable. Oftentimes, an equipment timeout is an unpredictable situation, something that's not preventable. So we're not going to require players to use their normal timeouts before they can ask for an equipment timeout. And the other nice thing about it is we're not going to restrict it to 2 minutes. Right now, an equipment timeout, you have to use your normal timeouts, and it's a maximum of 2 minutes. Well, heck, if you've got your second paddle, it's in the car, or you got a shoelace that's broken, it's going to take more than 2 minutes to be able to unlace your shoe and put a new shoelace in. So we said that's kind of an unreasonable rule. So we changed it so that equipment timeouts are up to the discretion of the referee. If you have one, if you don't have one, then the players themselves work out an accommodation between them for what's reasonable for an equipment issue that needs to be corrected. The fourth one is we don't see this again. We don't see this in rec play or social play, but we do see it in tournament play, where the players will, rather than say, "Hey, am I the correct server and am I in the right position?" They'll just ask one question that incorporates both of those, and they'll just say, "Hey, am I good? Am I okay?" And so this came about on the pro tours, and then rec players started seeing pro players use that question. So now they've adopted it, and we really didn't have a good answer for the referee in this case. So we for this year, for the last 2 years, quite frankly, we've been saying that you have to force the person to ask the question they really want to know the answer to. Oh, that was kind of stupid. We think so. If somebody says, "Am I good?" If the answer is yes, that means you're in the right position and you're the correct server, or you're in the right position and you're the correct receiver. But if they're not in the correct position, now the referee can truncate this whole time frame and just say, "You are the correct receiver, but you should be serving from over there," rather than wait and tell them no, and then we go through this verbal volleyball back and forth until you finally ask the right question and you get the right answer. So it was kind of an artificiality that really didn't make sense. So if you ask, "Am I good?" then the referee can now say, "Yes, you're good, but you should be serving from there." The other one, the fifth one that I'll mention and then take some questions, is having to do with the serving rules.
If you're enjoying the video, consider subscribing to the channel. You'll get notified of new videos that come out, and you won't miss out.
We get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of feedback as managing director of officiating on the serving rules. And why aren't the referees calling more illegal serves on players in tournament play? And the reason is because it's a tough call. It happens very quickly. The tolerances are very minor, and where some spectator might think somebody's serving above the waist, if you put it in slow motion, in fact, they aren't serving above the waist; they're serving right at the waist. Or the whole paddle and the wrist, bending of the wrist and having it above the wrist bend, or having an upward motion. Those things are very, very difficult to call in real time. In fact, I train all the referees, you don't ever call an illegal serve unless you're absolutely certain you're right. Because if you're not certain you're right, what have you just done? You've completely disrupted this person's concentration on their serve, and guess what? The rest of their game. So you better be right if you're going to call an illegal serve on someone. So what did we do? For 2023, the referees in tournament play will have the option of calling for a replay if the service rules are marginally close, just to send a message. So it's kind of like a verbal warning where, watch out here, you're close to violating the rule. In this case, we're going to say improper serve, reserve. That's the message that, either your paddle is on the correct position, you don't have a good upward arc of your arm at contact with the serve, and so forth. So I think that's the referees, I think, will be very, very, we'll look at this very favorably. So those are the 5 that I thought I would touch on. Those are the ones I think that, two of them are applicable to rec play as well as tournament play.
Thanks, Mark. I got a couple of follow-ups. But that serve thing, I don't. When players ask me, "Is that illegal?" I'm like, I got to film it. I have to film it with my phone, slow it down, and frame by frame it. So, I think that's such a tough thing to call. So yeah, for a referee, it's got to be a pretty nightmarish type of call. And I always tell players in rec play, I'm like, listen, unless they're having a competitive advantage, like they're just beaming balls, like deckle barish. I'm not saying deckle bar serves illegally, but unless they're generating that kind of pace on their serve, just move on with life. They're serving overhead, call it, but otherwise just leave it alone. But
if you want to know the other 2 rules that are important that are changing in 2023, I'm going to link to a video over here that you can check out and learn those rules. Be well.